Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining. My name is Carissa Gazda. I'm the Community Manager here at Tax Talent. Thank you so much for attending Session 1 of Virtual Tax Club with us. This 6-session webinar series is designed to give you the knowledge needed to obtain a top-tier tax position. We've brought together some industry professionals to give you tricks of the trade and promote a successful career in tax. In this first session, we will be discussing aligning your education for future success at your first job. This webinar is designed to be an open forum, and we encourage you all to ask any questions you may have. However, to eliminate background noise, we will have all participants on mute. To ask your question, please utilize the chat function on your toolbar. If you prefer to verbally ask your question, please utilize the raise hand option, and I will clear the floor for you. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass this on to our first presenter, who is Ron Markison. He is going to be discussing choosing the right classes. Ron, can you tell the group a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thanks for the introduction. I am Ron Markison, as was indicated. I am the director of the Masters in Taxation program at DePaul University, and I am also on the adjunct faculty at Golden Gate University in San Francisco. DePaul is in Chicago. Both have extensive online programs. Prior to coming on board at DePaul, I was a partner at Ernst & Young for 20 years, where I practiced in the mergers and acquisition space. So I can approach this from both the accounting side and what I saw as a partner in an accounting firm, and I can also talk about this from a faculty standpoint. With that, let's go on and talk. I think our first slide here is talking about choosing courses, and that is a little bit difficult here to answer. I'm going to assume most of the people on this call already are in a program, a Master's of Taxation or a Master's of Accounting with an emphasis in taxation. So to some extent, the things that I'm going to talk about are things you have already considered in choosing which type of program you want to be in. However, there might be some undergraduates on the program, so I ask you to listen carefully to the types of things I'm mentioning and use that in considering the type of program you want to choose for your advanced education. So with that, let's go into talking about courses. Now, depending on the type of program you're in, you're going to have more or less flexibility as to the courses that you can choose. All programs tend to have some required courses, and I'm going to make some comments on the required courses first of all, but then other programs, and we'll talk in a few seconds about that, have more elective type of courses. And so we will address that. Now, again, it depends on the type of program you are in as to how many elective versus how many required courses you have. Let's say you have a bunch of required courses that you have to take. They're required, so do I have any flexibility? Well, one of the things I would suggest is that you look at the credentials of the instructor for the course. And this can be a very key item. Now, you may again not have options with that, but in many universities you can, different people teach the same course. Now, I will give you a true life example. Right now, I am interviewing various faculty or various people who want to join the faculty. And many of these we want to hire a tenure track faculty member. Most of the people that I am interviewing, while they're interested in teaching tax, the only experience that they have had is preparing a tax return. and maybe an individual return or two, or a corporate return on an internship. I might suggest that that person is not the best instructor for you compared to someone who has actually done corporate tax work or done individual tax work and consulted with clients. And so there is a wide disparity depending on the university as to the credentials and the practical experience of the instructor. I am not hiring any of those people for my program. They may be fine for an undergraduate program, but they're not what we are trying to achieve in our master's program. The second thing I would tell you is consider the timing. Now, some of you are taking this and trying to get your degree in a 5th year. Fine, you don't probably have much in the way of options as far as timing. But some of you are taking and getting your advanced degree while you are working. And when I was a partner at Ernst and I was consulting with my younger people, or advising my younger people, and I knew they were in a master's program, I would try to get them to be taking courses at the time they were going to be working in a certain area. So if I knew they were going to be doing a lot of partnership work, I timed it so that they took the partnership course when they were doing that work. That way you have a actual experiential learning with the formal learning in read in classroom learning. So again, it's a function of, you know, what type of program you are in, how long you are taking it, but I definitely would consider timing. I didn't put a third bullet on here. It just dawned on me on a few minutes ago that there is another very key aspect, and that's the format of the course. That is it an online course or is it an in-class course? Some people learn better with respect to an online course or an in-class course. There's a difference in how these courses are taught. And you have to weigh the benefits of that. An online course may give you flexibility to listen to lectures in your free time in the evening, whereas a in-class course, you get a closer relationship with the instructor. So I can lay out pros and cons of both approaches, but again, a lot of it depends on how you learn. Some people are better in a classroom and some people just love the online. I'm an old guy. That's why I'm not showing my picture up here. I'm an old guy, and as such, I like the one-on-one or being in the classroom format, but most of my students love the online type of teaching. And I would say this quarter, 75% of my students are taking the classes online, and that just amazes me. So again, those are 3 things that apply to all courses, required or non-required courses. Now I'm going to talk for a few seconds here about some elective type of courses. And if we could advance the slide, please. Thank you. There are 2 types of electives, and again, this depends on the format or the type of program you are in. If you're in a Master's of Accounting with an emphasis in taxation program, you are going to find that you have a lot of non-tax type of courses that you have to take. You will probably be taking 4, maybe 5, but most times 4 courses in the tax area and then a lot of non-tax courses. When you're in the tax, if you're in an MST program like my program or maybe Golden Gate, you can take all tax classes. So you would focus more on tax specialty areas. There are 2 very big items or areas in tax that I strongly recommend you taking some coursework, and this will help you get a job or advance in your existing job. One is accounting for income taxes, ASC 740. The big firms and corporate world, they're all crying for people who know how to who deal with accounting for income taxes. It is one of the biggest problems that has been out there on financial statements. More restatements than about any area have been due to poor accounting for income taxes. So this, over the last 10 to 15 years, has probably been the hottest area. And if you can take a course in this area, I would strongly recommend it. International taxation with the TCJA, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, it just rewrote the international area. And taking courses in that will just advance your career. There's no question. And I would add on to that, probably the hottest area right now is the transfer pricing area. And if you can take a course in transfer pricing, I strongly recommend it. But those type of courses typically are offered in a Master's of Tax program, not necessarily in a Master's of Accounting with emphasis in taxation. Now, there are non-tax courses that are very useful. And I would say the number one non-tax course right now that is really hot, and I mean, I go to things by all the big firms. Everyone is talking one thing and one thing only: data analytics. And to the extent you can get some training in data analytics, that will help you. Now, some of this you may have to do on your own. A lot of the software is, I think you can go on YouTube and learn it, but some schools are also teaching it. The two that I hear the most about are Alteryx, which has to do with how you sort data, and then Tableau, which it deals with how you visualize or display data. So if you can get some experience in that area, some training, it will help you. Some schools have courses in negotiation, project management. Again, those are skills you will need in your job going forward. And then the one that the employers always come to me, no question about this. Every time they say, what's the weak point of the students coming into that you're giving us? The weak point is writing and communication. They don't know how to write, and they don't know how to make an oral communication. So if you can come up with something, some type of course that helps you, that your school has, that helps you in this area, I strongly recommend it. It's going to be uncomfortable, I know that. None of us like the first time we have to make a presentation, but it is expected in your job. So those are some non-tax areas I strongly recommend. So that covers really the types of courses. The one other thing they wanted me to mention here on the next slide is internships. I strongly, again, recommend internships, but again, it depends on where you're at. Now, if you're doing this over a period of years while you're working, probably an internship is redundant. In fact, you can't do it since you're already working. However, if you're a full-time student, I think the experience that you get from an internship is invaluable. It is, in fact, that's basically your door into employment. So I strongly encourage you to seek out these. And with that, I will just warn you, it's going to be a little bit tough for those full-time students, because if you're just starting full-time in September, a lot of the firms have already hired back in May, so you're entering the market late. But I will also tell you that there's a lot of internships that open up for the busy season. So with that, I think I'm a little bit going over, so I am going to stop my presentation and open it up for questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ron. Again, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to use the chat option to send them in, or your raise hand option, and I will clear the floor for you. We do have one question that came in. It says, for online courses, what is the best way to network with your professor?
That's an interesting question. The way, I teach a lot online. In fact, sometimes I teach from Mexico and Bahrain and some other places. So the best way is, I think it's a burden on the professor, or it is the professor who should be initiating it. What I tend to do is have a 1 hour live office hour with my class. And it's optional, where you can come in and ask questions if there's a problem with homework or something, or if I see that the class as a whole is having a problem in an area, I present some additional information. And it's in this 1 hour that I become very close to some of my students. And that would be the best, that's how I would start the networking. I would also say, just plain out send an email asking questions and stuff, or would be helpful to start the networking process. But you're right, it is more difficult in an online course.
Perfect. I think that's wonderful. One of the other questions that we received is actually from an undergraduate student, and it says, what are some additional undergrad classes you suggest when pursuing a master's in tax?
Okay, and that, again, I'm an expert on graduate classes, but as far as undergraduates, I know we are looking at our university at expanding data analytics into the undergraduate program. And so if you can get a head start by taking something in the data analytics area, or even in the computer science type of area, which familiarizes you with technology, different types of software that's out there, that would be extremely helpful. I would also suggest that, just like I said at the graduate level, if you can take a course to increase your writing skills or your oral communication skills. Maybe they have a public speaking course that's not even in the accounting program, but it's in some other program. I would strongly look into those type of courses.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ron. Oh, go ahead.
Carissa, I was just going to add on to what Ron said about kind of those courses that build your intangible skills. This is Stephanie Gilmartin. I'm a director of executive recruiting here at Tax Search. I work on the permanent side. But today, what we're seeing a lot in the market is a real need for those tax professionals to have not only the technical skills, but also the interpersonal skills, communication skills to go along with it. Because at some point in your career, you may really want to move up, and in order to take those #1 jobs or those higher level jobs, you will have much more interface with business units and cross-functional teams. So being able to communicate well and interface with high levels and people in other areas that you may have to kind of dumb down the tax technical side will be very important in your career. So those are not just filler classes, but important to your development.
Perfect. Great feedback, Steph. Thank you so much. If anyone has any other questions, please feel free to chat them in, and I will circle back to them at the end of the presentation if we have time. But for right now, we're going to move on to our next presenter, who is Paul Iannone. He's the founder of Tax Career Advisor, LLC, and he'll be discussing your first job. Paul?
Yes, hi. Thanks, Carissa. Hello to everyone. I'll just tell you a little bit about my background. Right now, I have my own. I'm a lawyer and a CPA. I have my own law practice, and it focuses on tax, and especially international tax. As Ron mentioned, international tax is a real hot area, and I'm finding that my practice right now is has really been focused in the international area. So before I had my practice, my career has been a long one. I've been at tax now for 44 years. I started in '75. I started with the IRS. I had about 8 years with IRS. I was not a lawyer at that time. I was an accounting major. After IRS, I went to work for a CPA firm, got my CPA license, and I was there for maybe 13 years, became a tax partner in the CPA firm. And then later in life, around age 39, I decided, I'd really like to go to law school. It was a very tough choice. I had 2 young children, I had a full-time job, but I did go to law school at night and ended up having to leave the public accounting firm I was a partner in, because going to law school at night, it's 4 nights a week, maybe 2 hours a night. It's a little different than the master's in tax program. So I went to work for a large corporation. It allowed me to have like a 9-to-5 job, and I finished my law school, passed the bar, and became tax counsel. It was an insurance company. I stayed there for maybe 5 years, went to another insurance company, and then eventually I decided to leave the corporate environment, and I joined academia. I was a professor for 4 years and continued, and then I opened up my own practice and did both. About 4 years in, my kids were starting to go to college, and I needed a little extra money, and I was recruited by Deloitte out of Manhattan in New York City, and I joined their merger and acquisition group. I was with Deloitte for about 6 years. Later in life, I left Deloitte, went back, practiced in a law firm, and then recently, maybe a year ago, I set up my own law practice again, and I'm practicing. But the title that you see here, Founder of Tax Career Advisor, it's another company that I've set up to provide career advice for tax professionals, CPAs, and lawyers. And if we can go to the next slide, Carissa. So what I'm going to be talking about is really, getting your first job out of school. So it sounds like we have a mix here of some, graduate students and undergrad. So if you're still, in the undergraduate or about to graduate, you have to make a decision if you're going to go to graduate school. I have up here on the left-hand side, MST versus MBA. So I wrote, if tax is your mission, MST is recommended. I really believe this. If you really want to be a tax professional, the MST is so valuable. I have my MST. I got that when I was practicing as a CPA before I went to law school. And I have to tell you that the MST was the only thing that really allowed me to do my job. I was hired in the CPA firm as the tax manager and then became tax partner. I was responsible really I was almost like the director of tax in the firm. Without the MST, I don't think I could have done the job. The MST really gives you the full picture of tax, like all 4 corners of the Internal Revenue Code. Very, very valuable program. And if you're in undergraduate school, the question that came back before, what courses should I take? If your undergraduate program has more than the 2 basic tax courses, take them. Enroll in every tax course that you can. The MBA program, is also valuable, and there's a few out there that are MBAs, programs with a concentration in tax. You're going to have you might take, or you might have a Master's of Science in Accounting, and typically with a concentration in tax, it might include maybe 3 or 4 courses in tax. I don't know if you're going to get the same deep dive as you will with the MST, so I'm really biased towards the MST program. So on the right side of this slide, I have credentials, and for all those that are accounting majors, and when you're done with undergraduate, I really recommend studying for the CPA exam. The CPA credential is still a very, very valuable credential. I know a lot of students there's a lot of accounting majors, and I'm finding there's not a lot of accounting majors that want to take the CPA exam when they get out. And I know the local accounting firms are struggling, even the people that they hire, to convince them to take the CPA exam. And we're struggling to find out, why. Why don't they want to take it? I would urge you to jump on that exam as quickly as possible, and you could pass it. There's great review courses out there. Having that CPA after your name, it does open doors. You have the CPA with an MST opens more doors. And a lot of students ask me, well, should I go to law school? And I say, well, I give them a maybe on that. If you're already working in tax, I would say, yeah, that's a good add-on. But if you're undergraduate school and then you want to go right into law school, my advice is always maybe work first, get a job in a public accounting firm, practice some tax, and then go for your law degree, and maybe even go at night and continue to work. Because if your law degree is focused in a certain area, or you know what you want to be when you graduate law school, you're going to have a much easier time getting a job. There was a lot of students in my law school that came right out of college, and they had no idea what kind of law they wanted to practice. And I have to tell you, they had a hard time finding work, and they ended up finding some very low-paying jobs in small firms. So if you're thinking about law school, my advice is to work first. Some other points here: work hard to find a tax internship. Ron mentioned internships, really valuable. If you can get into an internship while you're in school, it's a great it's a great springboard right into the full-time job. Find a mentor that is a seasoned tax professional. If you know somebody in the field, you could always call me. You could call Ron. You could call others. If you know somebody, it's good to latch on to somebody and get some advice. And the last bullet we already discussed. The only point I want to add there is I have in the parentheses at the end, consult state CPA requirements. I know in some states, even to sit for the CPA exam, they want you to have extra credits, 150 hours, which forces a lot of students into a graduate program even before they take the CPA exam. So you want to consult your state CPA requirements depending on where you want to take the exam and where you want to practice. But I urge all to take that CPA exam. Okay, Carissa, go to the next slide. So as far as experience, I have up top here, broad exposure versus subject matter expert or industry specialist. So, we have three sets of places you could work, and you really have to decide, all right, would I like a broader exposure, many different types of clients, different types of taxes, different industries, to get a good general knowledge, or am I going to go right into becoming a specialist, or what we call a subject matter expert? And you could be a subject matter expert or even a specialist in a particular industry. My view is get the broadest exposure possible. You may not, if you pick a specialty right away, you may not like it. And the broad exposure will really give you a viewpoint in different areas of tax, whether it's international, state, and local. So I always say, become first a generalist, and then you could specialize. In my case, I'm still a generalist, but I have pockets of specialties. I do a lot of international tax. I have practiced in the financial products area, merger and acquisition. So I have pockets of specialties, but I really believe that starting out, as a generalist, trying to learn as much as you can in all areas is really beneficial. So down below we have public accounting, government, and corporate. These, I think, are your choices for where you're going to end up trying to get work. Public accounting, is a terrific place to get experience, and they have certainly excellent training. And it's broken down here. We have the Big Four accounting firm. Underneath that, national accounting firm. So there's a whole second tier level of accounting firms that are not the Big Four. Firms like RSM, which was McGladrey. There's BDO, there's Ernst & Young, there's Deloitte, there's Ernst & Young, there's Deloitte, 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 the Grant Thornton, Cone Resnick. So there's loads and loads of firms that are not the big four, but are national. A terrific place to get work and get good experience. Underneath that, we have medium or regional accounting firms. So a firm may have offices in a particular region. For example, I'm in New England, so I know there's a huge firm here that has offices in Connecticut, New Hampshire, Vermont, Rhode Island. Those are regional firms. Another great place to find work and great experience. The regional firms are really looking hard for people. You know, a lot of the students are gravitating towards the big four and the national firms, and the last two here, the medium and then the small or local accounting firms, I have to tell you, are desperate for help, and they're looking for really good accounting students. And there's nothing wrong with starting out at a small firm, but you get great experience, and you might even get, you know, a more varied experience. You do the work from, you know, all the way from preparing the work papers all the way to the tax return. But, you know, sometimes you have to ask yourself, am I going to be able to graduate from a local small firm and get to the big four? That leap is a little bit more difficult. It's always easier to go from the big firms, and you could always ratchet it down to the smaller firms. So if you had the chance to work for one of the big four or one of the national accounting firms, I certainly would take that opportunity. If you can't get in, if your grades aren't there, or there's some other reasons why, there's no embarrassment. There's no, you know, nobody's going to look down on you if you choose a smaller firm. The next category, government, IRS, Treasury Department, terrific place to start. I spent almost 8 years there. You know, that's just solid tax experience. You're going to have to understand accounting, of course, because you're going to be doing audits of businesses, but it's very good tax experience, great training. You know, in my case, I was very young when I went there. I was still in college. I was 20 years old, and by the time I was 27, I was almost at the top of the pay scale. And I decided there was more to learn, and I just didn't want to settle in a government job too long. So I ended up leaving government. But you know, the IRS, if you really like tax, great place to start. Applying for those positions, not so easy. The application process is long. You also have to be ready for a complete background check of your personal life. I know in my case, they had inspectors and FBI interview friends and family and neighbors before they hired me. And that's not just for me, that was for everyone. To the right, we have corporate, so this would be, you know, industry. A little bit more difficult to get a job right out of school and go into corporate. Many of the corporate jobs are looking for somebody that does have some public accounting experience, and preferably at the larger firms. But I'm not saying you can't get a corporate job. If in fact you have an internship in a large corporation, you know, many times that will roll right into a permanent job with that company. The difficulty is, though, you know, in the corporate environment, you're going to be really doing certain types of work. I don't know if you're going to get the same broad exposure you would with public accounting. You know, my recommendation preference is to start with public accounting, and if you find that, you know, you would like to try corporate, then it's the time to move over. In the corporate world, there's a compliance function. The compliance function prepares the tax returns, does all the work papers for the audit, the tax provision. So we have usually a federal group, maybe a state and local group within the company, and there's something called indirect taxes. Indirect taxes include sales tax, property taxes, things like that. And they have specialists in the indirect tax area. Many corporate departments have a planning group and an international group today if the company is global. So you can specialize in the corporate world, and you can have certainly a variety of work. But what I find is people that have gone into the compliance section group have a hard time moving into planning. And I think a lot of people would like the planning area. That seems like the most exciting. And so to get into a planning group, I would certainly recommend that you have your Master's of Science in Taxation. So those are the three, I think, groups of areas that would be, your choices for your first job. The only thing that's not up here would be law firm. I mean, if you don't have a law degree, it'd be difficult to get into a law firm. And a publishing house is another area that's an area that I have not worked in. Okay.
Chris,
Go to the
Chris, I was just going to add a little bit of color on what Paul said. This is Stephanie with Tax Search. Paul, I think you hit the nail on the head on all of those points. I just wanted to add a couple more things. As far as, public accounting goes, exactly what Paul said. The smaller the firm, the broader the experience. If you go into Big Four, you're going to specialize in an area. It might be international, it might be M&A, it might be state and local. So, getting a broader general background at the beginning is great, but just know if you go into Big Four, you're going to specialize, which is great. That's not a bad thing. Also, as he talked about, if you don't go into public accounting right out of school, that really may close some doors for you. Many companies that we work with, will tell us, we need to have a candidate that has had public accounting experience. They want you to get that foundation. So do everything you can to go that route. As far as government, it's a great foundation, like Paul said, but if you do stay too long, it becomes challenging to go back into the corporate world. So make sure you go in, you're in for a brief time. Maybe many of the branches of government have a 4-year commitment that you have to make. So after that is done, get out, go into public accounting, or if you have a law degree, go into a law firm or go into corporate. So make that switch. A lot of times it's easier to go into public law right out of school and then go into the government later on in life when you want to have a much better balance of life, because that is one of the perks of going into government. As far as corporate right out of school, we definitely, like Paul said, do not recommend that. That will close doors for you, so don't do that. The other area on the functional side that I wanted to mention that is a really hot area that's usually combined with compliance is the tax reporting, the ASC 740 area. So a lot of times they will have a separate group if the companies are large enough that will have the tax accounting folks, or they'll combine them with compliance. So just wanted to add a little bit more clarity on that. Thanks, Paul.
No, that's great, Stephanie. I agree with everything you said. Especially, the government job. I was there for 8 years, and I think that was too long. I really do.
Yeah.
I think I should have gotten out a little bit earlier. They promoted a lot of people up really quickly, including myself. And then you get to that top, and then there's the next promotion after that. You have to wait maybe 10 years or so. So,
yeah.
And then you settle into a government job, which is, I wouldn't say easier, but the demands on your time aren't there, and the learning started to stop after a while. So you're absolutely correct. Unless you want to be a government employee, a career employee, there's those that want that kind of life, and there's nothing wrong with it. But if you really wanted to make some money and move up and experience some leadership roles, I agree. Moving out of government into public accounting or a corporate job is the way to go. So, very good comment there. Okay, so the next slide, I put this together. I have public accounting versus corporate. We've been talking about this on this call. Here's just some personal perspectives. Because I've worked both, and this is what my takeaways. I say in the first bullet, today's corporate tax departments are much leaner, and workload per employee is much heavier than in the past. Overtime can be common, especially during each quarter close. So the point here is that we all know that public accounting, if you've talked to anybody, is very demanding, long hours. Tax season can be grueling, and they say, "Oh, I just want to get out of public and go into corporate." And I felt that way too, but there was a time when a corporate tax department would have 40 or 50 people. Now it's much leaner, and they're working they're working much harder, and they're putting in some overtime. So there's a little bit different trend there. I say here, corporate can offer a more balanced lifestyle, but in public accounting, especially in larger firms, I see favorable trends to better accommodate family and personal life. So again, the whole, what they call work-life balance, which I'm not too sure there is such a thing. Sometimes in your life you're going to be working harder. Sometimes in your life you're going to be playing more. So the balance is throughout your life. Are you balanced? It's not a question of, oh, could I get out of work at 5 o'clock every night so I can go do something else? That's really not practical today. So I still think corporate does a little bit better job in flexibility. Public accounting, if there's tax returns that are due and they're due tomorrow, you're probably not going home at 5 o'clock. I think they're doing better. I think they're paying attention a little bit more to personal responsibilities and obligations. So corporate and public accounting are getting closer together, but I still think corporate does a little bit better job there. The next one, there's a greater demand and number of openings for tax professionals in public accounting. Many move from corporate to public accounting for advancement and compensation. So that last sentence I'll take in a minute, but we're seeing lots of job openings in public accounting at all levels, from the small firms all the way up to the big firms. Especially in the smaller firms, I have to tell you, I do a lot of consulting with the smaller firms, and they are desperate for people. I don't know what's happening. A lot of students that are graduating, many don't want to belong to a public accounting firm, but it's still the best place to start, I think. And now we're seeing some people moving from corporate to public accounting. They may have hit a maximum there. There might not be another promotion. They have to wait for somebody to retire. So many are going back into public accounting, and I'm one of those. I was in corporate, and I ended up back at Deloitte. So, I moved both from public to corporate, and then both from corporate back to public. The next bullet, public accounting may provide a more dynamic environment, offering a greater diversity in work assignments and more opportunities to specialize. I found that public accounting, the work was so varied. You're dealing with many, many clients. And I found in the corporate world, I was almost doing the same thing, year in and year out. It's a little bit more steady work, and I didn't find it as interesting. That's just my personal viewpoint on that. The next bullet, public accounting has a higher stress level due to the numerous time deadlines and client demands. I still think this is true. I do think there's a certain amount of stress that you have to deal with in public accounting. The time deadlines are difficult to deal with, and some of those late nights, and a call from a client at 6 o'clock asking for something that night, that certainly presents stress. I'm not saying the corporate world is stress-free. I do feel that it's a little bit easier to manage in the corporate world. Okay, if you can go to the next slide. This is just continuing on some considerations and factors if you're trying to choose between public accounting and corporate. Consider your personal health, your personal life, and other obligations. If you like a variety of work and challenges of the assignments, maybe you might want to look at public. Interactions with many clients versus one big client. When I was in corporate, I always viewed my employer as my client, but it was one client. Expectation of working overtime, fringe benefits, and work flexibility. Your ability to make partner in a public accounting firm versus your ability to advance to a leadership position in corporate. There's two different skill sets there. If you want to be a partner in a public accounting firm, you certainly have to be able to develop business, meaning, selling, getting new clients, selling services to clients. That's a big part of a partner role. That's not a role in corporate. It's a different kind of leadership role. Public accounting generally requires working independently with review and oversight. Corporate may require more teamwork. The next one, for partners in public accounting, there's more personal liability for mistakes that are not covered by sufficient insurance. So, public accounting, they do carry malpractice insurance, but it doesn't always cover the amount of the liability. And that liability does fall to the partners So you have to be ready for that kind of responsibility. And the last one, your ability to develop new business, which is an important aspect for advancement to partner in public accounting. That is so key. We find a lot of accountants, tend to be, maybe some of them tend to be shy, but that kind of approach, you really have to almost break out of that. I have to break out of it, and I have to understand, hey, if I'm not bringing in new business, there won't be any business. So selling is a big aspect of being a partner in a public accounting firm. So those are just some considerations and factors if you're trying to weigh public accounting versus corporate. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. Just wanted to mention quickly before we get into the Q&A section, Paul does have some really good resources down here, a book as well as his website. We will send these links out to everyone so you can view them after the presentation. We did have a question come in for you, and it was, did you find it difficult transferring between the different sectors in your career?
Is the word sectors?
Yes,
so
they said sectors.
Yeah, so sectors, if that means, different types of tax, I did not find that difficult. I think it's more difficult today. Once you specialize in something, I'm finding that companies are reluctant to give you a shot in a different area. So there's a lot of pigeonholing going on, meaning that, once you're specialized or you have a certain industry, sometimes it's hard to break out of that and jump to something totally different. I grew up in a different era where we were almost all generalists, so we learned a little bit about a lot of things. And, for me, it was easy to jump from one thing to the next, and they really gave me the opportunity to do that and the choice. I think it's a little bit more difficult today.
I agree with that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say I agree with that.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say I agree with that, Paul. Yeah. I do think it has shifted as far as specialization goes. I think that specialization in tax today is really key. If you want to work on, the bigger projects, make more money, that type of thing, in these bigger companies that have bigger issues that are global, they really, they hire the specialists, whether it be international, state and local, indirect taxes, like you mentioned. So, get that general grounding in the beginning, and then see what you really like. And then specialization, I think today is probably a much more important than it used to be.
Yeah, I agree, Stephanie. What I was going to say before, if the person asking the question was saying, is it difficult to jump from public, if the sector means like public accounting to corporate to government, I think if that's the question, I think going from public accounting to corporate is easy if you're in a bigger firm. Going to corporate, going from government to corporate, as Stephanie said, if you've been there too long, sometimes it's a difficult move. And then going backwards from corporate into public, I don't think is a difficult move at all. And I know some people that later in life did get government jobs, and that's where they ended up retiring.
I agree 100% on everything you just said.
Great. Thank you so much, both of you. And then we did have one more question for you, Paul. It says, out of all of your past roles, which one did you enjoy the most, and which one did you find the most challenging?
Okay. Really good question. I'll take the second one first. Most challenging, I would say that my time with Deloitte in the merger and acquisition group in New York City was the most challenging. It was a very, very demanding job. And the tax law, we needed to be generalists. We needed to know something about international financial products, corporate taxation, consolidated tax returns. We needed to know most everything. We were doing due diligence. And it was challenging also because it was more or less 7 days a week. There was very little downtime. And once you were on a deal, you're on the deal. And if your vacation happens to be in the middle of the deal, or you bring your laptop with you, and I found that I was working on vacation quite often. So that was demanding and challenging. I did it for 6 years. I started though at age 52 doing that, and so I was a little old to start that. As a younger person, I don't think it would be so difficult. They have a lot more energy than I had. So that was the most challenging. The most interesting, I really enjoy what I'm doing right now. I have my own practice. I can more or less choose my clients, and I'm doing the kind of work I like. I do a lot of international and merger and acquisition group work. At every place I've been to, I've enjoyed it. I enjoyed being at the IRS, and when it got time that I knew I had to leave, it was time to leave. So, I've really enjoyed each one of them. And then at a certain time, I decided, you know what, I need to move and learn some more. So, I really can't say that any one in particular I enjoyed the most, but I am enjoying my work today. I could say that I think I'm enjoying it more now than I have been in the past. But my career is kind of unusual. A lot of people settle in one job for a long time. I moved around a lot, and it's for me it's been fun. I didn't stay in a short time. Most of the jobs I was there more than 5 years, and in some cases 13 or more years. So for me, it's been a fun journey.
I was just going to say too, I think it would be the American dream for a lot of people to have their own firm. Don't get the idea that you could go out and be really successful at that at a young age. You've got to be like Paul. You've got to have years of experience to really be able to market yourself and compete with other firms, public accounting firms that are trying to get that business. So, he's got the years of experience to be able to say, I know how to advise you. That's very difficult to do at a young age. You just don't have it. So you can work up to where Paul is and then really enjoy it. But that's really hard to do, with just a few years of experience.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, so I'm in my 44th year of tax, and I'm still learning, and so I don't think I could have done this at the age of 24 or 25. I just don't think I could have done it.
Yeah,
I would add. I would basically confirm what Paul is saying. I found my experience at Ernst & Young to be the most demanding. In many respects, but I enjoyed every day there, even though the pressure representing the largest of the large companies is really intense. On the other hand, being in academia right now, I'm able to sit back. I don't have to worry about billable hours, and I can explore topics a lot more thoroughly. And so I find that to be equally interesting at this point in my career. I just find tax in total to be a very enjoyable area. Plus, I have my own consulting practice on the side, so I get to do that too. So it's been a wonderful career and a wonderful journey, and I've got more years in than than Paul. So
yeah, that's great, Ron.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. So we are going to move on to our final section. This will be presented by Peggy Cross. She is a senior executive recruiter here at Tax Search, and she will be discussing the highest demand specialties in tax and the functions. Thank you, Peggy.
Thank you, Carissa. Hello, everyone. Just to give you a little bit of background on me, I have been in the recruiting space for about 14 years. I've spent the last 7.5 years here at the firm with Tax Search. I work with Stephanie Gilmartin, who's also on the phone with us. And just to kind of give you an idea of what our firm does, we're the largest in the country that specializes in tax. We mainly focus on the corporate side, working with those tax departments. However, we did many years ago work in the public accounting space. We still will do the occasional search for some of those firms, but again, our focus really sits on the corporate side. We talk and work with tax professionals coming out of public accounting all the time. So we are very knowledgeable in both, the public accounting and the corporate areas. Carissa, if you could go ahead and go to the next slide. What I'm going to cover with you today is just the areas of tax that you could specialize in, and then we'll talk about definitely what's in demand and what we're seeing in the market. Here, you'll see that there are two types of tax. We have two different sides. We have the individual and the corporate. I'll briefly go over the individual. We don't do too much in that space, but we have occasionally. You do have the ultra high net worth individual, usually those people that own small to medium sized companies. And then we have the family privately held. Those are the searches that we have done for a couple of families. We've seen that usually here they have tax professionals that work on the corporate side and on the family side. So if you are thinking about, actually going into tax on the individual side, there's a profession to be had there. Now let's go ahead and transition over to the corporate side, where there's definitely a demand here as well. You'll see the different types of entities here. I'm just going to touch on everything at a high level. Most common is your C Corp, which is typically your larger companies. We also have partnerships, LLCs, MLPs, and the S Corps listed here. These can be used in any of the industries, but just to give you an example, we see the oil and gas industry utilize the MLPs and the partnerships often. And we also see partnerships used in private equity portfolios, just to kind of give you an example there. Go ahead to the next slide, Carissa. Okay. As we go into the specialties and the functions, you'll hear that I'm going to touch on a lot of the subjects that's already been mentioned here today by Paul, Ron, and Stephanie. But these are the primary specialties that you can definitely go into within tax, federal, state, international, and I have generalists listed here as well. Each one of these has subspecialties that you can specialize in, but you'll see generalist. Typically what we see here on the generalist side is it really depends upon the size of the corporation you're working with. You could be in any of these areas or a combination of them, but it's definitely an area that you could go into. I know Paul mentioned that, his background is definitely an example of a generalist. We can move on to the next slide.
Peggy, if I could just interrupt.
Sure.
The generalists, there's so few left that we're almost become specialists. The generalist category is almost a specialty now.
Yeah, I would agree with that because, as it's been talked about here, there is so much focus on specializing now that it can definitely be, it's a rare thing, and it's going away as we're bringing in new people into the profession.
That's right.
In the functional areas, typically here what you're going to see, planning, compliance, provision, audit. I threw technology in here as well. You can even have the term generalist bleed over into the functional areas. That is usually in the smaller companies, just because the larger the company, the more focused, the more specialized. I know you guys keep hearing that word, but with the larger companies, they really like to have the people focused on one area. And the couple of things that I do want to really bring out here is the provision. We've seen a lot of demand for provision. I think Stephanie brought that up. It's a great area to go into, but over the last 15 years, just due to the scandals in tax provision, that has been a huge area. And then technology as well. That's a growing area, and more companies are moving towards that to leverage the resources they have more efficiently. We can go to the next slide. In-demand areas of tax. So currently what we're seeing and have seen in the last several years is international tax and ASC 740. On the international side, as things continue to become more and more global, international tax, I mean, it's taken off. We thought reform, when that came in, it was going to eliminate some of the international complexities. It hasn't. It's done just the opposite, still making it rank as one of the most consistently in-demand areas. And then ASC 740, as everyone has mentioned here, you know, we went through the Enron scandal, tax revision, you know, it's been on the rise. And now we have more and more demands for transparency from governing bodies. It just continues to be in demand. I can tell you here at the firm, within the last 2.5 years, the majority of the searches I have done have been on the tax provision side. It's very easily taken 70 to 75% of my time. So that is definitely something that we're seeing. It's not going away. On the other side of the slide, you'll see on the rise. I have 3 listed here: technology, audit, and state and local tax. I'll start with technology. I can't encourage you enough. If you're on the phone and you're listening, make sure you're preparing yourself for the upcoming demand in technology for tax. You need to be asking your professors about technology classes. Ron mentioned, you know, the technology classes they offer. You need to be taking them. You need to try to get into that Alteryx class and see, you know, exactly the things that you're going to be faced with when you do get out here in these roles, and they're going to want you to know, at least be familiar with these things. Definitely stay in the loop with us here at Tax Talent, so you can continue to be in the know as it relates to tax and technology. We did start seeing the increase in tax technology right before tax reform hit. I will say tax reform caused the delay there, but we are beginning to see the return interest as tax departments are definitely, they're gearing back up to take on, you know, the new advances technology will provide for them. On the audit side, this is also going to be an area that we're going to see an increase. Now that tax reform is underway and tax professionals are working through the ins and outs here, we're going to start to see an increase just because of the new rules and regulations. They're going to start going through all of these to make sure they've been accounted for properly. So I think we can definitely expect that to be an area that's going to be focused on as well. The last one I listed was state and local tax. This one is probably a few years out, but just due to the demographics that we are going to see here with tax and the need for SALT people, it's going to be big. We have a demographic issue across the entire tax profession. And while this is going to be very good news for all of you coming out of school, it's going to provide opportunities. SALT it has a huge population right now of baby boomers, and they're going to be retiring and exiting the profession, which is going to cause a huge gap. The group behind the baby boomers, the Gen Xers, they're a much smaller group, and quite frankly, they don't have the number of tax professionals needed to backfill these positions. Not to mention, a lot of these tax professionals didn't even go into SALT. They went into international and federal. They just decided not to focus in the SALT area. So it's going to cause, you know, them to tap into the millennials. It's going to cause them to tap into the new groups that are coming out of school, and it's going to create opportunities for your generation much faster, but you're going to need to have the ability to come in and make an impact. So I will stress again the technology and learning as much as you can. We know tax will be more dependent than ever on the technology, and if you can show that you can come in, you have what they're needing technically, what they're needing on the technology side, and the work ethic needed to be successful, you'll definitely rise to the top. So there's going to be tons of opportunity for you. And that's it for me today.
Perfect. Thank you, Peggy. We did have a few questions come through. The first one that was asked is, I'm set to graduate next summer. Based on the areas of highest demand, where should I be sending my resume?
Well, I'm going to echo what has been said on the call already and say public accounting is always a good area to start. You're going to be able to go in, I mean, even with the international, the tax provision, the technology, all of those things, you're going to be able to go in there and get a more broader scope and really be able to figure out what it is that you like. And not only that, Stephanie hit on this earlier in the webinar, when we're working with corporate clients, I can't stress how many times they're looking for people that if they're not coming out of public, they at least have that public background. So I would definitely lean towards public accounting. There's nothing wrong with going straight into corporate, but I still feel like there's not, you know, you can't go wrong with going through public and then making that transition later.
Yeah, and I'll just tag on to that. If you go straight into corporate, you know, just know that, like Peggy said, and Paul, there's nothing wrong with that, but you might have some doors closed to you later on in your career. Also in corporate, a lot of times they expect you to know what you're going to be doing. So you don't have as many mentors or people really helping you to grow and develop like you do when you go into public accounting early in your career. There you have a mass amount of people to help you and to learn from. So it is a really good place to build your foundation. You do need to be kind of aggressive and don't wait for people to come to you. Use your university, go and look for job fairs. Public accounting firms put on job fairs all the time. So look for those. Your professor should have help as far as contacts, and, you know, be assertive, really manage that process as you start to look for jobs.
Let me jump in and say, for those going to public, especially the Big Four, be very careful in interviewing with the firms to ask them about how much they are going to require you to specialize. Some firms move you from group to group so you get a lot of experience in a lot of areas. Other firms more focus you right into one area and you're there for your career. So, and it's difficult to break away from that area. There's different philosophies in the different Big Four firms. Quiz them very carefully on that.
That's a really good point.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. We did have one more question come through. It says, what type of technology do we need to learn as tax students and professionals? I'll kind of open that up to all the panelists.
Well, I'll chime in and say that we're hearing a lot on Alteryx when we're talking to tax professionals, but any technology classes that you can take in school that's going to relate to, I believe Ron mentioned data analytics, it's going to be helpful. But Alteryx is the main one that I've been hearing. Stephanie, have you been hearing any other ones?
Well, I mean, I agree with you. I think once you join a public accounting firm, you're going to get much more exposure to the different technologies that they're using. If you're going to law school, you come out and you're going to be a heavier planning person. You'll probably use technology a little bit less on a day-to-day basis versus being a compliance tax accounting person. But you know, I think once you start going into public accounting, will expose you to those different technologies the best.
I can answer that a little bit better in a different way. I have gone to presentations by the various firms, each of the big four anyways, and the names that pop up are Alteryx and Tableau, Tableau being a visualization tool, but they will state that it's not necessary that you know those two. If you know something on one of them, you can pick up any other technology very quickly. So it's just having a search engine type of tool or a data analytics type of tool and a visualization type of tool, and then they will, as I say, teach you what they're using.
Perfect. That is great feedback. To all the attendees, we have about 3 minutes left. If you have any final questions, please feel free to chat them in. If not, I have one final question I'm going to leave with the panelists. And it is, do you have any recommendations for networking at this stage in our career?
I'll touch on that. If you're currently in school, the best places to network are your professors, people that you know on the personal side that might be in any type of tax role. You can always call us at Tax Search, get on our list. We'll help you, directly or indirectly any way we can. But I think in college, professors are the best to start. And then as you're going to job fairs, starting to network with the hiring authorities that attend those that are coming from public accounting firms are great as well.
I'll just add to that. In addition to your professors, if your school has an accounting club, I've noticed that they bring in some very interesting speakers, and those speakers, you may want to get their business card and their email address and start communicating with them.
I will also add, as far as the professors, again, this depends on the type of school you're going to. But if the school uses adjuncts, which many schools do, the adjuncts are basically part-time teachers who are actually practicing out there. And those people are wonderful networks. I mean, they are actually the people who will hire you who are now teaching. I would say some of the full-time faculty don't have as much in the way of networks, but the adjuncts definitely do.
Great advice. Well, I think that is just about all the time we have for today. I want to thank all of our presenters again for being here and spreading your knowledge with the program. If anyone has any additional questions about today's webinar, please feel free to post them to the Tax Talent Forum, and we'll be sure you receive an answer. Again, thank you everyone so much, and we look forward to seeing you on the next session.